Kiana remembered the crash of the vase as if it were happening in slow motion. She had been trying to defend herself, yet all it took was a single shove from her husband, Glenn, to send her stumbling into the coffee table. She adored it because it reminded her of the gentle woman who used to hold her tight on stormy nights. She once believed it would bring her good luck in love, something to anchor her heart in goodness and hope. But on that dreadful night, shards of shattered ceramic spread across the rug, echoing the fractures in her soul. She pressed her back against the wall, tears welling in her eyes, while her heart pounded with a force that almost choked her. Glenn's raging voice looped inside her head words she never imagined would come from the lips of the man she'd married. He was furious at something trivial. Dinner was not ready on time, or perhaps the sauce was a little too salty. She could not even recall the reason now because, at that moment, all she felt was fear. She tried to stand, but her knees shook so violently that she slumped to the floor. Glenn was still yelling. He moved forward in a burst of anger, pointing a trembling finger at her face. His words stabbed the air, scattering her confidence into 1,000 pieces, just like the remains of the broken vase. She could taste the salt in her mouth from her tears. She could feel the pounding of her heart in her throat. This was the turning point in her life, the moment she realized no one would rescue her but herself. Love was meant to be kind. She imagined her grandmother's voice, gentle and strong, reminding her to stand up, to keep her head high, and to refuse to be defined by someone else's violence. It was at that very moment she decided to fight for her freedom. She gritted her teeth and waited. She could not decide what was more terrifying, Glenn's anger or the emptiness she would face if she left him. When Glenn picked up a piece of the broken vase as if to hurl it across the room, she finally summoned the courage to act. Her hands, which had been trembling just a second ago, gained surprising steadiness. With a hoarse, determined whisper, she said, "Glenn, get out of my way." That night, in tears and racked by terror, she slipped away from their home, leaving behind her shattered belongings and a chapter of her life that had turned into a nightmare. She had no plan, just the raw will to survive. Long after she walked out into the cold street, she could still hear Glenn's wild curses echoing in her ears. 2 years later, those memories still haunted her. Kiana was now divorced, her heart wrapped in a thick barrier that protected her from even the faintest hint of affection. She had found a modest apartment in another city, somewhere far from her old life. She told herself each morning that she would not love again, and she declared it each night like a mantra. Trust was a fragile thing, and hers had been ripped apart. If she could not trust the man she had chosen to marry someone who had once showered her with sweet words and tender gestures, then how could she trust anyone else? She started working in a small bookstore. It was the kind of place with old shelves made of oak, dusty corners, and a delightful smell of well-loved books. She liked the routine, the daily morning check-in, the quiet lull in the afternoon, the usual stock organization. That job gave her a sense of control. Books never betrayed her. They were stories she could pick up or put down at will. She could walk into another world with a turn of a page, and that was enough. That was safe. In time, her coworkers came to know her as the calm but slightly distant woman who smiled politely but never really opened up. They would tell funny anecdotes or share personal details, hoping Kiana would do the same. But she always held back, responding with polite nods or short, carefully chosen words. If anyone asked about her personal life, she would wrap it in vagueness. Eventually, they stopped asking because her private world was walled off by silence. Kiana welcomed that silence. She told herself it was better this way. Life was simpler when you did not risk heartbreak. She needed no one, and she was fine with that. The memory of Glenn still lingered in certain triggers. The sight of a broken object, a raised voice, or the unexpected slam of a door that made her flinch. She had grown used to her new normal. In her mind, a quiet, solitary life was the only path to safety. Meanwhile, across town in a spacious, modern apartment overlooking a beautiful skyline, Derek Bingham woke up to a morning that felt much like every other day in his life. He had wealth. He had all the comforts a man could desire. Women adored him. He was tall, with a sharp jawline and piercing dark eyes that seemed to see straight into a person's secret wants. He walked with a confidence that made crowds part for him like the sea. People described him as charming, even seductive. He was known for being polite to everyone, from the CEO of a big firm to the man washing the windows outside his building. Yet, with all the admiration that surrounded him, Derek felt a strange emptiness in his chest, as though something vital was missing. Sometimes, he would stare at the city lights late at night and wonder, is this really all there is? He had grown accustomed to people's assumptions. They saw a man with a brilliant smile and a magnetic presence. They saw a man who wore expensive suits and had a car that roared with power. They thought he must enjoy the attention. And at times, he did. But when every woman you meet wants to be more than friends, when everyone sees you as the ultimate catch, it becomes complicated to trust that someone likes you for who you are, not for what you are. Derek was well aware that half of the people who approached him did not know a single thing about his likes, his dreams, or even his simple habits. Some only wanted the thrill of being with a man that so many others desired. That thought made him feel lonely, though he would never show it. His daily schedule included overseeing his family's business. This company had specialized in premium real estate developments for decades, and Derek inherited his father's leadership role once his father retired to a villa on the Italian coast. Derek liked the challenge of it. He loved designing homes that felt like sanctuaries for people, yet something still felt incomplete, an invisible barrier blocking him from happiness. He had tried dating. He had tried social events. He had even gone through a brief engagement that broke off when it became clear his fiancée was more interested in flaunting his name than in truly loving who he was. He felt a fleeting sense of relief when that relationship ended, but also an uncomfortable hollowness because he was back at square one alone, and not quite sure what real love looked like. Derek's mother, June, was always on him about finding a wife. "You can't go on waiting forever," she liked to say. She cared for him deeply, but she had a certain idea of what made a perfect wife for her son. She imagined a polished woman, likely from a background similar to theirs. She pictured someone with a refined style, a gentle manner, and an eagerness to fit into the Bingham family traditions. Derek, however, had never been one to follow a script when it came to personal matters. He had a restless spirit, and believed in letting life guide him toward the right partner rather than forcing it to happen. He just did not know how that partner would appear or whether she even existed. On a casual weekend, Derek decided to wander around a shopping district close to his office. He had finished a round of meetings earlier than expected. There was no urgent task waiting for him, so he figured he could stroll through the local shops to see what might catch his eye. He stopped in a few boutiques, a cafe, and then noticed a quiet bookstore nestled between two tall buildings. It was a bit old-fashioned, with a wooden sign hanging above the door, promising an endless supply of tales and a cozy reading nook. Something about that sign intrigued him. He decided to walk in. The place was not crowded at that time of day. A few people were browsing. The hush of turning pages was almost meditative. The smell of coffee from a small station near the entrance mingled with the scent of old paper. Derek inhaled, feeling an immediate calm wash over him. He began to walk between the shelves, running his fingers along the spines of books. He loved reading, Hay always had. It reminded him of simpler times, nights when his father would read him classic novels, and weekends when he would lose himself in fantasy stories. As he roamed, he accidentally bumped his shoulder into another customer. He turned to apologize, and there she was. Kiana did not notice Derek at first. Her attention was on a thick hardcover she was trying to place on a high shelf. He muttered, "Oh, excuse me," catching her off guard. She turned, expecting an impatient or annoyed face. Instead, she saw a polite, handsome man wearing an apologetic smile. She blinked. "It's all right," she replied softly. Derek returned a kind nod. "Beautiful bookstore. It's my first time here," he said, hoping to ease the tension. Kiana managed a small smile, one that was polite rather than welcoming, and moved aside to let him pass. She could tell he was different. He was not rude or demanding. He had a gentle tone in his voice, but she also noted the easy grace in his movements, the good looks that could make many hearts flutter. She automatically put him in that category of men who could walk in anywhere and have anyone. She did not mind him, but she certainly did not plan to get to know him. People like him were rarely interested in quiet, reserved women like her, and she did not want them to be. Derek, however, felt intrigued. Something in her eyes drew his attention. Not just beauty, she had a beauty that radiated despite her simple attire. But more than that, he sensed a quiet strength and sadness behind those eyes. She was an enigma, and for reasons he did not fully understand, he wanted to solve it. He briefly considered asking her for a recommendation, a chance to keep talking. But he noticed she had moved on swiftly, turning her back and focusing on her task. Something in her posture suggested she did not want a conversation. Respecting her boundary, Derek simply gave a polite nod and continued browsing. He left the store a few minutes later, a paperback tucked under his arm, but he walked out with a lingering thought, "Who is she?" He realized he had not even asked for her name. Kiana exhaled the moment Derek left. She could sense his gaze on her when he spoke, as if he was curious about her. She tried to push away any thought of him. Men with that kind of presence spelled trouble in her mind. She was determined not to open even the smallest crack in her heart for anyone, much less a man so clearly surrounded by attention and admiration. She would not risk it. She had survived too much to throw herself into any new vulnerability. There was no need to dwell on someone who would probably never step foot in that bookstore again. Yet, life has a strange way of weaving paths that you least expect to cross again. In the days that followed, Derek found reasons to revisit that little bookstore. He told himself he needed another novel to fill his quiet nights. Sometimes, he claimed he was simply in the area for a meeting and needed a quick break. Each time, he came hoping she would be there. And each time, Kiana tried to keep things purely business. He would buy a book, she would ring it up, and he would leave. She was polite but distant, answering his questions in short sentences. Derek, for his part, respected her space, but tried to show a gentle friendliness. One afternoon, he decided to make a bolder move. As he approached the counter, he said, "I'm not sure what to read next. Do you have any suggestions?" He gave her a warm smile, leaning on the counter just slightly. Kiana swallowed, trying to maintain her composure. "What genres do you like?" she asked in a neutral tone. "I like romance sometimes, but also drama, maybe something that has depth," Derek answered. "I like stories about hope. Maybe that sounds naive, but I guess I need that from time to time." Kiana felt a flicker in her chest at the mention of romance and hope. She quickly reminded herself not to get carried away. "Well," she began, scanning the new arrivals. "This one is about second chances and healing," she said, passing him a novel with a subdued cover. "It's a bit dramatic, but it's got a hopeful tone in the end." Derek turned the book over and read the back. Sounds like exactly what I need, he said. Thank you, he added, making sure to hold her gaze for just a second longer than usual. She gave him a quick nod and slid the book into a paper bag. Have a good day, she said, her voice quiet, her face calm. Kiana thought about Derek that night. She asked herself why. She did not want to dwell on him, but her mind kept returning to the look in his eyes. She could almost sense honesty in them, a softness that felt at odds with the self-assured exterior he displayed. In her experience, men who looked like him tended to be shallow or arrogant. Derek, however, seemed different, but that did not change her vow. She had promised herself she would not trust again, no matter how kind or sincere someone appeared. A man's gentle facade could easily hide storms of anger beneath it. She still had nightmares about the day Glenn's masked cruelty tore through her illusions. She was not about to walk into another snare. During the next week, a local storm caused leaks in some parts of the bookstore's old roof. Water dripped from the ceiling near the classics section, prompting Kiana to scramble for buckets and towels. The store's elderly owner, Miss Harriet, lamented about the cost of repairs. Even with insurance, it was going to be expensive to fix. The store was not generating high profits, and Miss Harriet worried aloud to Kiana, "If this goes on, we might have to close up for good." Kiana's stomach sank at that possibility. The bookstore was her refuge, the only safe place she had found since leaving Glenn. She did not have much in savings, and she could not offer the kind of funds needed. But as she was fretting over what would happen next, Derek strolled in. He saw the buckets placed around to catch the leaks. Kiana gave him a polite greeting, hoping he would not ask too many questions. Instead, Derek walked around the store, concerned that water damage might ruin the books. He returned to the front desk and looked at Kiana with empathy. "Are you okay?" he asked. Kiana shrugged. "The roof has a few issues, but it's nothing we can't handle," she said, trying to sound confident. Derek, noticing the gloom on her face, asked, "Does the store need help?" He was direct yet gentle. Kiana hesitated. "I don't think Miss Harriet would want to burden anyone," she replied. "Besides, it's a lot of money. We'll figure something out." But inside, she felt panic because she knew that the store's finances were shaky. Derek reached into his blazer pocket and pulled out a business card. "I know someone who does roofing and restoration. He's fair and he's good. I'd be happy to cover the cost until Miss Harriet can pay it back over time if that would help." Kiana frowned. She worried about the strings that might come with such a favor. "That's very generous, but I don't think we should." He gently cut her off. "I'm not trying to intrude. But it seems like you love this place. I only want to help keep it running. No hidden catches." Kiana was torn. She did not want to be indebted to anyone, but she also did not want to lose the store. After a long pause, she nodded. "Let me talk to Miss Harriet," she said. "I can't decide on my own." The next day, Miss Harriet practically wept with relief when she heard Derek's offer. She was not naive. She insisted on signing a simple agreement that ensured she would repay the loan as sales improved. Derek agreed without hesitation, forging a sense of partnership with the store. Almost immediately, the repair crew arrived, patching the leaks and preventing further damage. True to his word, Derek did not push or pry. He merely took care of the bill, left a copy of the contract for Harriet's records, and stayed out of the way. Still, Kiana felt uneasy about it. She appreciated the help, but she could not entirely erase the suspicion that generosity often came with a hidden price tag. Glenn used to give her gifts when they were first dating, only to hold them against her later as proof that he was so kind and she was ungrateful. She hated that she was now in a position that required help from a man, even though she recognized that not all men were like Glenn. In the days following the repairs, Derek came by less often. He did not want to pressure Kiana or make her feel any sense of obligation. He cared about how she felt, even if he barely knew her. The small contact he had with her was enough to make him realize that she was worth getting to know better. Yet, he also sensed that pushing her too hard would only make her retreat further. Kiana, for her part, could not stop her mind from dwelling on the fact that this handsome one with wealth and so many people ready to praise him would step in to help a little bookstore simply because he cared. She tried not to overthink it. In her eyes, men used kindness as a tool. Still, day after day, she found herself recalling his gentle tone or that honest look in his eyes. She scolded herself. "Don't be a fool." As the bookstore resumed its normal rhythm, Miss Harriet, feeling extremely grateful, decided to organize a small community event. She wanted to celebrate the repairs, and also wanted to express her thanks to everyone who supported them. She had local authors come in for signings, planned readings for kids, and set up a little corner for tea and snacks. She invited everyone from the neighborhood, and out of courtesy, she extended the invitation to Derek as well. Kiana hoped he might be too busy to attend, but on the day of the event, he showed up looking warm and relaxed, dressed in a simple sweater and jeans instead of his usual formal attire. The small event had a pleasant buzz. People moved around, chatting, enjoying the refreshments, and browsing through piles of freshly stocked books. Derek helped move a few chairs when the older volunteers struggled. He served tea, politely refusing any attempts by the older ladies to fuss over him. He greeted Miss Harriet with a fond hug, which surprised Kiana because she had never seen him show such open affection in public. Eventually, he made his way to the table where Kiana was organizing books for one of the local authors. She glanced up at him. "Thank you for coming," she said, sounding more sincere than she intended. He nodded. "I wouldn't miss it," he replied. "How can I help?" For a moment, she hesitated. Then she handed him a stack of books. "Could you place these on that table near the front? Some people might want to look at them before they leave." He obliged, stepping away to set up the display. Then he returned, standing beside her in comfortable silence. A part of Kiana wanted to shoo him away, fearful of the little sparks that flared in her mind whenever he was close. But another part, a quiet, timid part, liked having him near. She was not sure what to do with that feeling. Near the end of the event, a band of neighborhood teens played soft music on acoustic guitars. The gentle strumming created a calm atmosphere. Miss Harriet invited everyone to gather around for a short speech thanking those who had supported the store. She singled out Derek in her gratitude, causing some curious whispers in the small crowd. Kiana noticed a few young women craning their necks to get a better look at him. He seemed oblivious or politely unresponsive to the admiration, which made Kiana watch him with mild interest. When the event concluded, the space began to clear out, leaving only a few people who were helping with cleanup. Derek stayed to assist. As Kiana swept the floor, she accidentally knocked over a half-empty plastic cup, spilling a bit of juice. She sighed, bending down to wipe it up. Derek crouched beside her and offered her a clean cloth. Their hands brushed, an unexpected rush of warmth shooting through her. She looked into his eyes in that moment and saw concern. Not pity, and not romantic pushiness. Just concern and maybe a hint of something else. "Thank you," she murmured. He held her gaze. "Anytime," he said softly. That small exchange felt like a door inching open in Kiana's guarded heart. It was not love. Not yet. She reminded herself, though, that life taught her harsh lessons about trust. She wondered if it was wise to risk more heartbreak, especially after what she had been through with Glenn. Over the next few weeks, Derek visited the store again. Not daily, but often enough that Kiana noticed a pattern. He no longer pretended to need book recommendations every time. Sometimes he would come and actually read in the small seating area, sipping coffee, occasionally glancing at her. Other times, he would just walk in to see if the store needed any errands done. Their conversations remained brief, but the tension between them shifted from polite distance to cautious friendship. One late afternoon, when the store was almost empty, Derek lingered until closing. Kiana was straightening shelves when she saw him approach with a new book in hand. "I'm about done for the day," she said, hinting that they would be closing soon. He nodded. "I noticed. Mind if I walk you out?" She glanced at him, uncertain. Then she decided there was no harm in letting him walk with her to the bus stop. She shrugged. "Sure." They stepped outside, the chill of the early evening air nipping at them. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft hues of pink and orange. They walked side by side in silence for a few moments. Kiana felt the weight of unspoken words, a tension that made her heart thump too loudly. Finally, Derek cleared his throat. "I never properly introduced myself," he said. "My name is Derek Bingham." She gave him a half smile. "Kiana Brooks," she replied. He smiled back, as if this formal introduction was a moment to be cherished. "Well, Kiana Brooks," he said, "I'm glad to walk with you today." They reached the bus stop, and Kiana glanced at the schedule. "My bus is coming soon," she said. Derek looked as though he wanted to say more but hesitated. "Okay," he responded quietly. After a beat, he continued, "Listen, I know we don't know each other well, but if you ever need something, a ride, help at the store, or just someone to talk to, my door is open." Kiana pressed her lips together. Part of her wanted to brush him off, but there was an authenticity in his offer that disarmed her. She nodded slowly. "Thank you, that's kind of you." The bus pulled up, and she boarded, tossing one last look at him. He raised a hand in a small wave. She sat by a window seat, watching him shrink into the distance as the bus drove off. In a bittersweet way, she sensed a crack in the wall she had built around her heart. It frightened her. At home, Kiana cooked a simple dinner, her mind swirling around Derek's voice. She found herself curious about his background, his reasons for being so genuine. Could he possibly be as good as he seemed? She remembered Glenn's early days, how charming he had been, how thoughtful he had appeared. She tried to shut down her musings, reminding herself that illusions can be deceiving. After dinner, she picked up her phone and scrolled through the bookstore's social media page. She was supposed to post some pictures from the event. While uploading, she saw new comments. People thanking the store, praising Miss Harriet for her resilience, and some remarks about the generous benefactor, though they did not mention Derek by name. It was a heartwarming thread, and it reminded Kiana that not everyone in the world was out to hurt her. She sighed, feeling a subtle warmth. Maybe she could allow herself a small step toward a new friendship. Derek, on the other side of town, was equally lost in thought. He had been out to dinner with some business acquaintances, yet his mind kept drifting to Kiana. He wondered how he could cross that gulf of caution she held between them. He understood that she likely had a difficult past, given the way she distanced herself from every small approach. But what kind of past? He did not want to pry. He only wanted to be steady and respectful. The next morning, he rose early, watched the sunrise from his balcony, and felt a rare sense of excitement about the day. He had a quick meeting to attend, but he planned to drop by the bookstore in the afternoon, if only to say hello. He knew she might keep him at arm's length, but something about her made him want to try, and Derek was a man who did not shy away from pursuit, especially when he believed in his purpose. As luck would have it, a few days later, Kiana found herself in a predicament. She needed to pick up some heavy boxes from a local publishing house. Miss Harriet asked if she could manage it, but the boxes were more than Kiana's small car could handle. With some reluctance, she remembered Derek's offer for help. She debated with herself, pacing back and forth behind the store counter. Finally, she pulled out his business card, which Miss Harriet had on file, and dialed the number. Derek answered on the second ring. Derek Bingham. Kiana inhaled a shaky breath. Hi, Derek. It's Kiana from the bookstore. She was not sure why she suddenly felt anxious, but her voice shook slightly. His tone immediately warmed. Kiana. Hi. Is everything okay? She explained the situation about the boxes. It's a bit last minute, but if you happen to have some free time this afternoon, I would really appreciate a hand. If you're busy, I totally understand. She heard him chuckle softly. I'm not too busy for a friend, he said. Text me the address. I'll meet you there. Kiana arrived at the publishing house first. The receptionist led her to a small warehouse area where the boxes were neatly stacked. They contained promotional materials and some discounted books that the publisher was donating to the store. She tried lifting one of the boxes, immediately realizing it was heavier than she anticipated. A puff of dust rose from the box, making her cough. By the time Derek appeared, she was wiping sweat from her forehead. Hey, he greeted, rolling up the sleeves of his shirt. Without hesitation, he grabbed 2 boxes. She bit her lip, feeling a strange mix of gratitude and self-consciousness. She was used to doing things on her own, and letting someone else do the heavy lifting felt both relieving and unsettling. They carried the boxes out to Derek's SUV, loading up the trunk and back seat. On the final trip, Derek joked about how he would rather lift boxes than attend some dull board meeting. Kiana found herself smiling at his playful tone. She realized it was the first time they had spent time together outside the bookstore in an actual, practical situation. Once all the boxes were loaded, she leaned against the side of the car, catching her breath. You're stronger than you look, she commented, trying to make small talk. He shrugged with a grin. I go to the gym sometimes, he said lightly. You're pretty strong too. I saw you carrying that big one by yourself. Her cheeks warmed slightly at the compliment, but she tried to play it cool. Thanks for helping. I know you're probably busy. Derek shut the trunk. I'm never too busy to help you, Kiana, he said in a tone so sincere it made her heart stutter. They drove back to the bookstore in Derek's SUV, the boxes rattling slightly in the back. The conversation was calm and unforced. He asked her about her job, her daily routine, but he avoided personal questions about her past. She appreciated that. He gave short glimpses of his own life, his family business, his love for reading, and a few traveling stories. She listened quietly, impressed by how normal he was under all that wealth and attention he received. He did not boast or seem bored by ordinary life details. At one point, he even mentioned that he used to volunteer at a local community center, reading to kids. The casual mention made her see him in a new light. When they arrived at the store, Kiana guided him in unloading the boxes. Miss Harriet thanked Derek profusely. Kiana noticed Harriet giving her a not-so-subtle wink of approval, which Kiana pretended not to see. Afterward, Derek helped place the boxes in storage. By the time they were finished, it was nearly closing time. Kiana offered him a cup of coffee from the store's small kitchenette as a thank you. They stood there, sipping coffee, the store lights casting soft shadows around them. Something about the moment felt oddly domestic, as though they had known each other much longer than they actually had. Derek broke the silence, clearing his throat. Kiana, can I be honest for a second? Her grip on the cup tightened. Here it was the question she had dreaded, the possibility of him prying into her private life. Still, she answered with a nod. He seemed to choose his words carefully. I know you keep a bit of distance. I respect that, but I want you to know that I don't expect anything from you. Your friendship is more than enough. I just like spending time with you. He paused, searching her face. And if you ever feel comfortable enough to talk about what makes you so guarded, I'll be here to listen. A lump formed in her throat. She did not know how to respond. She wanted to say thank you, or maybe even share a piece of her story. Yet the fear wrapped around her heart, reminding her of how trust could be broken. Finally, she managed a quiet reply. That means a lot, thank you. Derek gave her a small, understanding smile. "I should go," he said. "I'll see you soon." In the following weeks, a fragile bond grew between them. It was not exactly romancino yet, but something deeper than casual acquaintance. Derek respected her boundaries, never pushing or demanding. Kiana, in turn, found her walls slowly weakening. She told herself she would not commit her heart, but she allowed herself to feel a bit more at ease in his presence. They talked about books and current events, sometimes about life in general. She discovered that beneath his polished charm, Derek was compassionate, attentive, and patient. One rainy afternoon, they ended up alone in the store. Miss Harriet had gone out, leaving Kiana to manage until closing. The downpour outside kept most customers away. Derek showed up, removing his damp jacket and shaking off raindrops like a carefree child. Kiana handed him a spare towel she kept in the back for emergencies. He dried off. Then they sat on the small couch in the reading nook, listening to the patter of rain against the windows. They talked about random topics, favorite movies, memorable childhood stories. Kiana found herself laughing genuinely, a sound she had almost forgotten. Derek watched her with a soft smile. "You have a nice laugh," he commented. She blushed and looked away. "I guess I haven't used it much in a while," she said softly. The atmosphere grew thick with a gentle warmth, and Kiana felt a sudden urge to share more. She took a shaky breath, her heart pounding. I used to be married," she admitted, eyes fixed on her folded hands. Derek's voice remained calm and gentle. "I see." She swallowed. It didn't go well. Her mind flashed back to Glenn's anger, the shattered vase, the fear that used to grip her. She bit her lip. "He was." She trailed off, the words too heavy to say out loud. She did not want to detail the abuse. She just wanted Derek to know she had been hurt deeply. Derek placed a soft hand on hers, not gripping, just a light touch to let her know he was present. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice laced with genuine sympathy. A single tear escaped her eye, and she quickly brushed it away. "I thought I loved him, and he turned into someone I didn't recognize. It made me believe that maybe love is just an illusion." Derek's gaze radiated empathy. "I can't pretend to know what you went through, but you didn't deserve that. Nobody does. I'm so sorry that happened to you." He hesitated, carefully considering his words. "But love isn't always an illusion. Sometimes it's just hidden in the right person, waiting." She let out a trembling sigh. "Yeah, maybe." Part of her felt a small relief in sharing at least this much, but another part braced for a response she feared, pity, or an overwhelming wave of "let me fix you." Yet, Derek only squeezed her hand lightly and then let go, giving her the space she needed. She looked at him through blurred eyes, feeling an emotion too strong to name. That night, after Derek left, Kiana sat alone in the bookstore, wiping a few more tears. Surprisingly, they were not tears of sadness alone, but a confusing mix of sorrow, relief, fear. She replayed his words in her head, "Love isn't always an illusion." She still could not fully believe it, but something in his voice planted a seed of possibility. Days passed, and their friendship continued to blossom. Miss Harriet, who was in the twilight of her years, noticed how Kiana's eyes lit up whenever Derek walked in. She encouraged the two to organize events together, giving them more reasons to spend time with each other. They set up book clubs, reading circles for kids, and even small charity fundraisers. The store's reputation began to grow, partly thanks to Derek's connections, but also because of the warm ambiance that now filled the space. Kiana found purpose in these events, focusing on the joy of bringing people together in the world of literature. Derek admired her dedication, seeing a spark in her that he guessed had been dimmed by past pain. One afternoon, Miss Harriet asked Kiana to accompany her to a city council meeting. The council wanted to propose some new regulations that might affect small businesses, including the bookstore. Kiana agreed, And to her surprise, Derek joined them, offering his support. He used his knowledge of city planning and business regulations to help make a strong case for independent stores. After the meeting, Kiana thanked him, feeling a warmth in her chest that she struggled to hide. They exited the council building together. Derek checked his watch. "It's still early. Want to grab lunch?" Kiana paused, glancing at Miss Harriet, who smiled and said she had another errand to run. That left Kiana with little excuse. She nodded. "Okay," she said quietly, ignoring the flutter in her stomach. They found a cozy cafe not far from the council building. It had vintage decor and soft music playing in the background. They settled at a corner table, the midday sun streaming in through large windows. After they ordered, Derek leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You did great today," he said. "I loved how you spoke up for the store." Kiana gave a modest shrug. "I'm just trying to do my job." He chuckled. "You're too humble. You're passionate about that place. And it shows." She felt a flush color her cheeks. "Thank you." The conversation shifted to lighter topics, and she asked him about his family. For the first time, he spoke about his mother and father at length. He admitted they had high hopes for him to settle down with someone who fit neatly into their social circle. She saw a flicker of wistfulness in his eyes. "But that's not how love works," he said. "I want someone who I connect with, not someone who's perfect on paper." Kiana stirred her coffee. "I guess I understand that more than you think." He nodded, a tender expression crossing his face. "Kiana, can I ask you something without pushing too far?" She paused, but curiosity got the better of her. "Sure. Are you happy?" he asked gently. The question stunned her. She had not thought about happiness in a long time. For so many months her focus was on survival and staying safe. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "I'm not unhappy. I like my job, and I'm relieved to be free from a terrible marriage. It's like I'm on guard all the time, making sure nothing can hurt me again." He listened intently, nodding as though each word mattered. "I hope one day you find it in yourself to lower that guard, even if just a little more, because you deserve happiness." She pursed her lips, fighting a rush of conflicting feelings. Before she could formulate a response, the server arrived with their meals. Conversation shifted, and she welcomed the distraction. But the question lingered in her mind, echoing the rest of the day. As the months rolled on, Kiana and Derek formed a growing bond that straddled the line between close friendship and a slow-burning romance. Kiana was still fearful, often second-guessing herself, but she could not deny that Derek brought light into her life. He never pushed her for more than she was prepared to give. When she had nightmares about Glenn, Derek would simply be there to listen if she needed to talk, or he would distract her with a comforting presence. He discovered the small joys that made her smile, like the aroma of lemon tea, or the feel of a brand new hardcover novel in her hands. They started texting more frequently, sometimes just to share a funny meme or a picture of something amusing they saw during the day. Little by little, these moments built up an intimacy that made Kiana's heart flutter. But old fears still tugged at her, reminding her that feelings can turn sour and hearts can be broken. She fought an internal battle between the part of her that wanted to embrace love again and the part that demanded caution. Then came the day she had dreaded for a long time, a run-in with her ex-husband. She had convinced herself Glenn was out of her life for good, but ghosts from the past sometimes appear without warning. It happened on a Saturday afternoon. The bookstore was bustling with a small crowd. Kiana was ringing up customers at the register. She looked up to greet the next person in line, and her blood ran cold. Glenn stood there, arms folded, a sneer on his face. 1,000 memories flashed through Kiana's mind: danger, fear, the shattered vase, the stifling nights of tears. She froze, swallowing hard. The store noise seemed to fade, replaced by the pounding of her heartbeat. He stepped forward, placing a single paperback on the counter. "Still pushing books, I see," he said with an edge of sarcasm. "Didn't think I'd find you here, but I guess fate has a funny sense of humor." Kiana's hand shook as she scanned the book. She could barely look at him. "Why are you here, Glenn?" she managed in a shaky voice. He shrugged. "I'm in town for business. Heard about this bookstore. Didn't know you worked here. Now I do." He narrowed his eyes.
"So, how've you been?"
She felt suffocated. Painful memories collided with her present reality. She muttered, "We're not doing this here," trying to sound firm. She handed him his receipt, hoping he would take it and leave. He stepped closer, his voice a mocking whisper. "I see you've moved on to better things." His gaze darted around, as if looking for something else. "Who's the new guy who's got everyone talking? I heard someone helped fix up this dump. Is that your new man?" Before she could respond, Derek appeared from the back of the store, carrying a stack of books. When he spotted Glenn near Kiana, he walked over, sensing trouble. Derek gave Glenn a polite smile, but the tension was palpable. "Is everything all right?" he asked Kiana gently. Glenn smirked. "And here he is, Prince Charming." He eyed Derek with contempt. "I was just saying hello to my wife," he added mockingly. "I'm your ex-wife," Kiana corrected, forcing the words out with as much conviction as she could muster. Glenn rolled his eyes. "Details." He turned to Derek. "Just so you know, she's got a lot of baggage." Kiana felt tears threaten to burst. She struggled to keep her composure, her whole body trembling. Derek, sensing her distress, stepped protectively between them. His calm tone betrayed a subtle warning. "I think you should leave." Glenn held up his hands as if in surrender. "Relax, I'm going. Just wanted to see if she was still the same pitiful thing she always was." With that, he turned on his heel and strolled out, leaving Kiana breathless and shaken. The customers nearby had watched in startled confusion. Derek immediately guided Kiana to a quiet corner of the store, away from prying eyes. She sank into a chair, tears rolling down her cheeks. Memories of Glenn's abuse surged through her, overshadowing the fragile peace she had built. Derek crouched beside her, resting a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Kiana, breathe," he whispered. She gasped for air, covering her face with her hands. It felt as though every wound had reopened. "He was so cruel," she whispered. "I left him to get away from this." Derek nodded, gently stroking her arm in a gesture of comfort. "I'm so sorry you had to see him again," he said softly. "I'm here." A trembling fury rose inside her, directed not at Derek, but at the mere fact that Glenn could still rattle her. "I hate that he can do this to me," she choked out. "You're safe now," Derek assured her. "He's gone." After a few moments, Miss Harriet came over to ask if everything was okay. Kiana forced a reassuring smile for Harriet's sake. Harriet patted her hand and returned to the counter to help the remaining customers. Derek stayed by Kiana's side until she could stand without shaking. He suggested she step out for fresh air. Together, they walked outside to a small alley beside the store where few people passed. The moment they were alone, Kiana found herself collapsing into Derek's arms. Tears she had held back now flowing freely. He held her close, his hand stroking her hair as she sobbed into his shoulder. It was an outpouring of fear, anxiety, and frustration. That day marked a pivotal point for Kiana. After her tears had subsided, she realized how desperately she wanted to stop living in Glenn's shadow. If she continued to cower, the abuse would still define her. That night Derek took her home, ensuring she was safe. He ordered takeout and stayed with her, talking softly about anything that might ease her mind. She found comfort in his presence, a warmth she had not allowed herself to feel in years. At one moment, Derek looked at her with an expression so tender it nearly undid her. "Kiana," he said quietly, "you never have to face him alone. Not anymore." She felt her heart squeeze. She leaned her head against his shoulder, letting him guide her through the storm of emotions. For the first time since she left Glenn. In the days that followed, Kiana wrestled with her feelings. She oscillated between fear of repeating the past and a growing certainty that Derek was nothing like Glenn. She recalled the way Derek calmly told Glenn to leave, the protective shield he created around her. She thought about the gentle way he cared for her afterward, with no demands, no judgments. Gradually, Kiana opened up more. She told him about how Glenn's temper escalated over time, how she felt trapped and blamed herself for failing to see the warning signs. She confided how she believed she would never be worthy of healthy love again. Derek listened without interrupting, his face a mixture of sadness and compassion. Then he quietly reminded her that she deserved respect, kindness, and happiness. Each time he said it, she believed it just a little more. One evening, Derek invited Kiana over to his apartment for dinner. She hesitated but accepted. It felt like a leap of faith. His place was modern but cozy, with large windows offering a sweeping view of the city. He wore a simple apron as he cooked, joking that he was not a master chef but would try his best. Kiana observed him from the kitchen island, smiling softly at how comfortable he seemed in this domestic setting. As they ate, the conversation drifted to their respective childhoods. Derek told stories of learning to ride a bike in his grandparents' backyard, scraping his knees repeatedly but stubbornly refusing to quit. Kiana reminisced about summer visits to her grandmother, the one who taught her the value of reading and the joy of storytelling. The atmosphere felt light, almost like a moment out of a life she never thought she could have. When dinner ended, they sat on the living room couch, sipping glasses of wine. A quiet tension filled the air, and Derek reached for her hand. She did not pull away. "Kiana," he began in a calm voice, "I think I'm falling in love with you." Her heartbeat soared and her mind spun. She looked into his eyes, seeing an earnest vulnerability she had never witnessed in any man before. She pressed her free hand to her chest, as if to steady her racing heart. "Derek," she whispered, "I don't know if I can love again. I'm still so scared." He gently rubbed circles on the back of her hand with his thumb. "I understand," he replied, "and I won't push you into anything you're not ready for. But I need you to know that you've shown me a new kind of happiness just by being yourself." He paused, inhaling slowly. "Whenever you're ready, I'll be here." Tears blurred her vision again, and she leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. She could feel his warm breath mingle with hers. "Thank you," she breathed. They stayed like that for a long moment, wrapped in the promise of something bright and hopeful. Over time, Kiana began to see that her heart was stronger than she realized. She still had nightmares about Glenn, but with Derek's steady support, she managed to face those fears. They talked about therapy, and Kiana decided to give it a try. She found a counselor who specialized in trauma recovery. Little by little, she delved into her past pain, learning coping strategies and rebuilding her self-worth. Derek accompanied her on some of the more difficult days, waiting outside the office with a reassuring smile and an open heart. Her gradual journey toward healing paralleled the deepening of their connection. She started to let him in, inch by inch. She no longer flinched when he reached for her hand. She laughed freely at his jokes, sometimes leaning her head on his shoulder just because it felt right. She realized that love did not have to come in the form of grand gestures. Sometimes it was the quiet presence during moments of vulnerability, the gentle words that built her up rather than tore her down. But tension still loomed. Glenn's sudden appearance had rattled her. She feared he might show up again, especially now that he knew where she worked. There was also the matter of Derek's mother, June, who had been hinting that she wanted to meet the woman her son kept mentioning. Derek tried to assure Kiana that June was a kind soul at heart, just a bit fixated on tradition. Still, Kiana felt her old insecurities creep in. Would Derek's family approve of her? She was a divorced black woman with a painful history. She was not from a wealthy background. She did not move in high society circles. Derek brushed off her concerns. "You are who you are, and that's who I want," he said firmly. "My mother will see that." The invitation came one Sunday. June asked Derek to bring Kiana to a family dinner. Kiana was so anxious she considered backing out at the last minute. But Derek gently reassured her, so they drove to the Bingham mansion together. It was a sprawling estate, surrounded by trimmed hedges and a fountain at the entrance. Kiana's pulse raced as they approached the front door. Inside, the decor was tasteful but grand. June, a poised woman in her mid-60s, greeted them in the foyer. She smiled politely, though Kiana sensed a hint of curiosity behind that smile. "You must be Kiana," June said, extending her hand. "It's so nice to finally meet you." Kiana forced herself to exhale. "Thank you for having me," she said softly. She noticed Derek standing close, giving her a supportive nod. They moved to a sitting room, where June offered them tea. The conversation began with small talk, whether the renovations June had done, Derek's latest projects. Kiana felt tense, but she tried to answer June's questions about her work, her interests, her family. While June was polite, Kiana detected a subtle reservation in her tone. Was it about Kiana's background, her past, or something else? Eventually, June asked pointedly, "I hear you were married once." Derek mentioned it. Kiana's stomach flipped, but she refused to hide. "Yes, that's true." She tried to keep her voice steady. "It ended badly, but I'm grateful I had the strength to leave." June regarded her for a moment, then nodded. "I see. It's a good thing you're free of a toxic situation." She sipped her tea and added, "I only want what's best for my son, and if he's happy, I can accept his choices." It was not a ringing endorsement, but it was not outright rejection either. Derek cleared his throat, sensing the tension. "Thank you, Mother." Despite the undercurrents, dinner went relatively smoothly. June grew warmer as the evening progressed. By the time dessert arrived, she was sharing funny stories about Derek's childhood mischief, which made Kiana giggle. After dinner, Derek walked Kiana out to the car. The night was cool, stars shimmering overhead. She felt a swirl of relief and residual nerves. "That wasn't so bad," she whispered, leaning against the passenger door. He smiled, tucking a strand of her hair behind her ear. "You were amazing." Her eyes began to water, an emotional mix of relief and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "I've never felt this safe." Derek leaned in, capturing her lips in a gentle kiss. It was their first true kiss, tender and full of unspoken promises. A rush of warmth flooded Kiana's entire being, and for a moment, time seemed to slow. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his, whispering, "I think I might be falling for you too." He brushed his thumb across her cheek in a feather-light caress. "I'm right here," he murmured. They drove off into the night, hearts brimming with a new sense of possibility. For a while, life was peaceful. Kiana began to believe that perhaps her story could have a new ending. The bookstore thrived. Her therapy sessions helped her move beyond the trauma, and her relationship with Derek blossomed. They spent weekends exploring parks, trying new cuisines, or simply curling up on her couch watching movies. She felt her guard dropping, replaced by a gentle excitement for the future. Then one day, the suspense she feared arrived. Glenn's reappearance turned out to be more than just a random visit. He began showing up at the bookstore on random afternoons, never buying anything, just lurking. Kiana told Derek about it, and he grew concerned. On multiple occasions, Glenn would leave if Derek approached. But the hostility in Glenn's eyes was unmistakable. One evening, Kiana closed the shop late. She left alone since Miss Harriet was out of town, and Derek was stuck in a meeting. The street was quiet. She spotted Glenn standing in the shadows near her car. Her pulse skyrocketed. She tried to step back, but he moved forward, blocking her path. "Kiana," he said in a voice that feigned calm, "we need to talk." Her breath trembled. "No, we don't," she answered firmly. "Leave me alone, Glenn." She attempted to walk around him. He grabbed her arm. "You think you can just walk away like that?" His voice was low and menacing. "You're still my wife, in God's eyes." She yanked her arm free. "I'm not your wife," she spat. "We're divorced. I won't let you control me anymore." He laughed cruelly. "I can see you're playing happy with that guy. You think he can protect you?" He stepped closer, his presence oppressive. "You're mine." Fear coiled in her chest, but she summoned every ounce of courage. "I'm not yours. Don't come near me again." He raised a hand as if to strike her. At that moment, a pair of headlights appeared at the end of the street. It was Derek, pulling up in his car. Glenn sneered, releasing Kiana. With one last glare, he mumbled, "This isn't over," and fled into the darkness before Derek could confront him. Kiana collapsed into Derek's arms, shaking uncontrollably. He held her tight, his voice shaking with anger and concern. "I'll protect you," he whispered. "I promise." That night Derek insisted that Kiana stay with him. She was too shaken to argue. At his apartment, she paced the living room, tears rolling down her cheeks. What if he does something worse? She fretted. He's unpredictable. Derek led her to the couch, holding her hands firmly. "We can file a restraining order," he suggested, his voice resolute. "We'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe." She nodded, realizing that she should have done this long ago. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I need to do that." They spent the next few hours drafting statements and planning their next steps. Derek called a lawyer friend, who agreed to help expedite the process. Kiana felt a grim determination as she made the decision to stand up to Glenn's intimidation once and for all. With the restraining order underway, Kiana tried to refocus on her life. Derek's unwavering support gave her strength. He convinced her not to walk alone at night, insisting he or one of her co-workers accompany her whenever possible. She also kept her phone close, ready to call for help if needed. Meanwhile, the situation weighed on Derek too. He was furious at Glenn's behavior, but he tried to remain level-headed for Kiana's sake. They leaned on each other, forging a bond that felt unbreakable. A week passed, and there was no sign of Glenn. The restraining order was approved, serving as a legal shield. Kiana felt some of her tension ease, though she remained vigilant. She told herself that this might be the end of Glenn's harassment. Late on a Friday, the bookstore hosted a special author event. The turnout was bigger than expected. Derek was there, helping set up extra chairs. Kiana was busy greeting guests, handing out programs, and making sure everything ran smoothly. She caught sight of Derek across the room, so effortlessly handsome and gracious that her heart nearly burst with affection. As the evening progressed, Kiana introduced the featured author, who spoke about her latest novel and engaged the crowd with witty banter. The mood was bright and energetic. But halfway through a session, the door swung open and Glenn stepped in, ignoring the looks from the guests. Kiana's blood went cold. She wondered if he was foolish enough to violate the restraining order in a public setting. He stared at her, a twisted smile on his face. "Did you think a piece of paper would keep me away?" he called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. Gasps rippled through the audience. Derek instantly stood, face tense, stepping between Glenn and Kiana. "You're trespassing." "Leave," Derek commanded, his voice shaking with rage. Glenn ignored him, eyes locked on Kiana. "You can't hide behind him forever," he said. taking a threatening step forward. "You belong to me." Kiana's heart thundered, but something in her snapped. After all the therapy, all the fear, she realized she was done letting Glenn control her life. She squared her shoulders, stepping forward despite Derek's cautionary hand on her arm. "No," she said, her voice firm. "I don't belong to you, Glenn. You have no power over me anymore." He tried to lunge toward her, but in an instant, guests in the bookstore stood up. Derek and two other men grabbed Glenn, restraining him. Someone called the police. Glenn spat curses, thrashing in their hold, but he could not break free. Kiana stood tall, tears streaming down her face, but her expression was set in resolve. When the police arrived, they arrested Glenn for violating the restraining order and for attempted assault. As he was led away in handcuffs, he hurled one last threat at her, but she refused to flinch. In the aftermath, the bookstore was in a flurry of commotion. The author and guests tried to calm each other, while some whispered about the dramatic scene they had just witnessed. Through it all, Derek stayed at Kiana's side, wrapping an arm around her shoulders protectively. Miss Harriet, who had been in the back room, rushed out and nearly fainted from shock when she heard what happened. Kiana, surprisingly composed, gently assured her that everything would be all right. In that moment, Kiana knew she had finally broken free of Glenn's shadow. She had stood up to him. She no longer felt like a victim, but a survivor. Once the police finished taking statements and the crowd dispersed, Derek helped Kiana lock up the store. The two of them stood outside, the night air still buzzing with leftover tension. Kiana let out a heavy sigh, feeling drained, yet oddly relieved. Derek turned to her, his eyes brimming with admiration and love. "You were so brave," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so proud of you." She closed her eyes, letting the weight of his words sink in. "I've been running from him for so long," she whispered, "but I'm done running." He brushed a tear from her cheek. "You deserve peace. I want to give you all the peace and love you could ever need." Her eyes met his, and in that instant, she felt a surge of gratitude so overwhelming that it took her breath away. She realized she loved him with a certainty she had never known before. "Derek," she said softly, "I love you." A smile of pure relief spread across his face, as if he had been waiting to hear those words forever. "I love you too," he whispered. He drew her into a tender kiss that tasted of salty tears and the promise of a new beginning. They decided to go back to his apartment, away from the chaos of the bookstore. Once inside, Kiana clung to him, releasing the torrent of tears she had been holding back. But these tears were not just from fear, they carried a sense of liberation. Derek held her on the couch, stroking her hair until her sobs subsided. When she finally looked up at him, her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. "I'm ready," she said, lacing her fingers with his. "I'm ready to have a life where I'm not defined by what Glenn did. I'm ready to accept happiness, if you still want to share it with me." Derek's eyes glistened with emotion. "I do," he promised, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. Hayes spent the night talking in low voices, planning the future that until now had felt out of reach. Kiana told him that she dreamed of opening a second store someday, or maybe a little cafe attached to the bookstore. He told her about possibly expanding his own charitable initiatives. They realized how well their ambitions aligned. Everything felt new, but also right. Over the next few months, Glenn's legal issues escalated. He found himself facing charges that forced him to leave Kiana alone or risk more severe consequences. Kiana kept in touch with the police to ensure she was protected. With him out of the picture, she focused on what lay ahead. Therapy continued to help her cope with the remaining anxiety, and Derek's unwavering presence gave her courage to build a joyful life. They spent holidays together, visiting Derek's parents' home. June, seeing Kiana's courage and the love that blossomed between them, slowly opened her heart. In turn, Kiana welcomed June's curiosity, sharing bits of her own upbringing and interests. They still had differences, but mutual respect began to bridge any gaps. The bookstore flourished with renewed spirit. Kiana took on more responsibilities, expanding its social media and planning lively community events. Derek contributed ideas and sometimes used his connections to invite speakers or local celebrities. They turned the store into a cultural hub, a place where people came to share stories and find comfort. Miss Harriet, watching from the sidelines, felt like her child had finally found her wings. One quiet evening, several months after Glenn's final outburst, Derek and Kiana walked through a neighborhood park. The autumn leaves crunched beneath their feet, the sky tinted with the orange glow of a fading sun. They talked about daily things, exchanging laughter and light-hearted anecdotes. Near a small pond, Derek pulled Kiana aside. With a nervous smile, he reached into his coat pocket. Kiana's heart thudded in her chest as he knelt down on one knee. He held out a small velvet box, looking up at her with eyes full of reverent love. "Kiana Brooks," he began, voice unsteady with emotion, "you came into my life when I was least expecting it, and you showed me what real love and strength look like. I can't imagine my future without you in it. Will you marry me?" Her breath caught. The question she had once sworn she would never answer again was now being asked by a man who had brought hope back into her shattered life. Tears rushed to her eyes, and she laughed with pure joy. "Yes," she answered, her voice trembling. "Yes, I'll marry you." Derek slid the ring onto her finger and stood up, gathering her into his arms. They kissed under the last rays of sunlight, the park wrapping them in a golden glow. In that instant, every painful memory lost its sting, overshadowed by the brilliance of what lay ahead. Word spread quickly among friends and family. Miss Harriet cried tears of happiness, claiming she knew all along they were meant for each other. Derek's mother, though initially hesitant, offered sincere congratulations, even helping Kiana pick a venue for a modest, heartfelt ceremony. Kiana's therapy group cheered for her, celebrating her triumph in finding real love after such a dark chapter. The weeks leading to the wedding were busy but filled with excitement rather than anxiety. Kiana found a simple yet elegant gown that suited her, a white dress with delicate lace along the sleeves. Derek, looking sharp in a tailored suit, could hardly contain his pride whenever he talked about the future Mrs. Bingham. They decided on a quiet garden wedding, surrounded by fresh flowers and close friends. The wedding day arrived, bright with sunshine and the fragrance of blooming roses. Kiana stood at the entrance to the garden, her heart fluttering with nervous anticipation. She thought back to the day she left Glenn, her hands shaking, her life in tatters, never believing she could stand here in a white dress, ready to say, "I do" to a man who truly loved her. As the soft music played, she walked down the aisle, tears of joy pooling in her eyes. Derek stood at the altar, a look of awe on his face. He reached out for her hand when she approached, and the warmth of his touch reminded her that she was safe, cherished, and finally free. Miss Harriet, June, and the few dozen guests watched with misty eyes as Kiana and Derek exchanged vows. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, they sealed their promise with a tender kiss. The crowd erupted in applause, the garden alive with celebration. Kiana felt a joyful sob escape her throat as Derek held her close. She was no longer the broken woman who had sworn never to love again. She was healed, a new chapter waiting to unfold with the man she adored. That evening, after all the guests had gone home and the garden lights were turned off, Kiana and Derek found themselves alone in their new home. It was a tasteful apartment they had chosen together, a symbol of their shared life. They sat on the balcony, overlooking the night sky, sipping champagne and reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. Kiana leaned her head on Derek's shoulder, letting out a contented sigh. "I never thought I'd get here," she murmured. "I never thought I'd find love again, real love." Derek kissed the top of her head, wrapping an arm around her. "You deserve every happiness, my wife," he said softly. The word wife sent a delicious shiver through her, one that held none of the old fear. They gazed out at the city lights, hands intertwined. In that peaceful glow, Kiana realized that she was no longer haunted by the past. She had learned to trust someone worthy, a man who showed her that love could be gentle, patient, and steadfast. Their story, so full of heartbreak and hope, had led them to a future she once believed was impossible. She closed her eyes, letting the steady beat of Derek's heart reassure her of the life they would build together, free and in love. And so, with the moon shining above and the promise of a new day rising in their hearts, they began the rest of their happy ending.